I was reading some articles the other day online, Guardian, and there's some quite damning statements that they talk about when they're looking at the Church of England, the national church, and church growth and church decline. And let me read one of the statements that I read in the Guardian. And this is what it says. The Church of England is facing a generational catastrophe, with only 2% of young adults identifying with it. And he goes on to say, with only 7 out of 10 under 24 saying they have any faith at all. And so this is quite a challenge. It's a challenge because it seems that the Church of England seems completely irrelevant to 98% of the young adults we have in our society in this country. And when you look back over the last 40, 50 years of church attendance, there's a graph that looks a little bit like this. We see church 60 years ago, church attendance was a high proportion of percentage of people. And then it took a little bit of a nosedive where people just stopped going to church. And then for the last 15 years, there's been just a simple, steady decline where less and less of people are attending to church. And then when you break down those statistics and you look at the age of congregations, we'll see that congregations are getting increasingly older. So new people are not coming in and old people are beginning to pass on. And that's where the church is at. And when I think about that, that's a massive challenge. And as a vicar, that needs to challenge me. I need to be thinking, what are we going to do about that? And I've been to conferences within the diocese and within the Church of England where we've looked at these statistics and said, we have to do something. Because if we allow this just to stay as it is, in the next 10, 20, 30 years, the church will almost be non-existent. But that's only part of the story. There's some other church statistics that are not just based around attendance. They're looking at how churches are making a real difference in the communities they find themselves in. And we're seeing now across the Church of England more and more churches engaging with their community in a real meaningful way. It's not just about Sunday attendance, it's about things like food banks, mothers and toddler groups, works with the elderly and other charities where we're saying we need to make a difference in the communities that we find ourselves in. And so the church is having a real impact. But there's another element as well as just these things that are helping and serving the community. There's a challenge for us to find expressions of church that can relate to the younger generations. And that was actually my previous life in church ministry. I led a youth church, and the drive for that was, how can we be church that relates to youth culture? And so we actually met on a Friday night and for a whole chunk of time in an old nightclub. And we needed to adapt our expression of church to bring the good news to a culture that thinks church is irrelevant, boring, and of no significance. And when I read through the Bible, I see this same story, this same narrative played out. If we read through Philippians 2, there's this beautiful poem about the Trinity, God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and how God said, I'm going to send my Son into a culture, into humanity, so when he's embedded in that humanity, he can reveal the love of the Father. And there's this sense of God coming out of himself into humanity to share life with humanity. In that, God gave up all sorts of things. He said, although equality with God was not something to be exploited, he took the form of a servant, became obedient, and humbled himself to death, even death on the cross. There was a humility to lay aside all sorts of things in order to demonstrate the love of God in the community, in the culture that he was seeking to reach out to. And that's actually our challenge as church. If we're to take the incarnation seriously, we need to be a church that says we need to relate to the changing culture we find ourselves in. We need to lay aside some of the things that we think are really important for us to have and say, no, we're going to sacrifice in order that others can experience the love of God. There's all sorts of ways that we're going to do that in the future of our church, but one of the ways will be through Trinity Centre. And part of the vision behind Trinity Centre is so that we've got a venue and a church site that can adapt and offer different forms and expressions of church, so that we can respond to the changes around us in a positive way. Some of that will be midweek and some of that will be weekend. But the challenge and the call for us is to say, how can we offer good news to a generation that's discarded it? How can we bring life and hope to a generation that thinks it's irrelevant? And that is the journey of our church. And that's a challenge that we're going to take seriously. And Trinity Centre will be part of that journey of saying we need to be good news. As culture changes, we need to hold out the word of life in each generation. That's my commitment, and that's going to be our commitment as church in the next coming years.